Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Well, greetings, friends, and welcome to this January 16, 2014 edition of Nightcast. I apologize to some of you who tried to tune in a few moments ago. We had some technical problems. We put a slide up on the screen. Those of you who are watching by mobile device, if you had us live a few minutes ago, we had to sign off in order to get things to work properly tonight. So hopefully you recycled and you're back with us okay. So I'm just stalling a little bit to give those of you on a mobile device time to get back in sync with us here. Tonight, we have a lot of news, so I want to get right into it. The first news story relates to an ice jam, nearly 1 kilometer in length, that is prompting flood warnings along the Maumee River in the U.S. state of Ohio.
This is the Maumee River, which has been jammed by thick ice spreading nearly a kilometre along the river surface. It's already blocking the flow of the water, and that's led to flooding upstream. The big worry now is that when the ice finally breaks up, it could release a surge down the river, causing flooding in more heavily populated areas.
Okay, and they caught me with a short story on that, and our buttons are freezing up tonight, folks, but stand by. I think I can fix that. Okay, there we go. All right, we have some new devices, but they are to help us get our volume levels straightened out that we've had a little bit of a fight with, but we're having problems with that new software. It's kind of throwing some things off, but bear with me and we'll resolve it all here tonight, hopefully. The big news out of Egypt is this. The voting is over. However, the confirmation of the results, we're awaiting that. The voting was for a referendum on a new constitution, with officials saying that it has been overwhelmingly approved. The draft constitution replaces one introduced by Mohamed Morsi before the Islamist president was ousted. State media report that 37% of registered voters took part, slightly more than in the vote under Mr. Morsi. The referendum is being seen as a vote on the legitimacy of his removal and of the army, which removed him. It was boycotted by members of the Muslim Brotherhood, the Islamist movement Mr. Morsi comes from, and which wants to see him return to office. On the first day of voting yesterday, on Tuesday, 2 days ago, 9 people died in clashes involving Mr. Morsi's supporters. The second day, yesterday, Wednesday, passed off largely peacefully. Some 400 people are said to have been arrested over the 2 days for disrupting the vote. Today, police fired tear gas during clashes with students protesting outside Cairo University in the Giza district. There is a little bit of voter apathy. Only 37% of the registered voters turned out for the voting. According to the BBC's Kevin Connolly, I have a quote from him here. He said, "It could be argued that over the course of the past 2 referendums, 70% of Egyptians have now given their verdict on rival versions of their constitutional future. They just didn't do it in the same poll," Kevin Connolly said. And Kevin Connolly is a correspondent for BBC News stationed in Cairo. And, you know, friends, his comment, where Kevin Connolly, let me repeat that, he says that it could be argued that over the course of the past 2 referendums, 70% of Egyptians have now given their verdict on rival versions of their constitutional future. So even that 70% that came out, 37% of them voting in this last referendum, and then the other part of the 70% voting in the other referendum, it went one way the first time and this way the second time. And that relates to the scripture in Isaiah 19 and verse 2 that says, and now this is God speaking through Isaiah, God saying, "And I, the great God, will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight everyone against his brother, and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom." So right from God's word, no matter what people come up with as reasons for this great conflict in Egypt, right here from God's word, God himself says he is the source behind the Egyptians being against Egyptians, neighbor against neighbor, everyone against his brother, and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. So God gets the credit. He said this is what he would do, and you can see this prophecy given to us through Isaiah being played out today, right now, before your very eyes. Well, friends, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has been in the news a lot lately, and he's in the news again today in several ways. And on this one, John Kerry has urged Syria's opposition to join next week's peace talks. The main political opposition group, the Syrian National Coalition, meets in Istanbul tomorrow to vote on whether to go to the talks. Mr. Kerry stressed the aim of the so-called Geneva II talks was to begin the process of setting up a transitional government to end the war in Syria. The 3-year conflict has claimed the lives of more than 100,000 people. An estimated 2 million people have fled the country, and some 6.5 million people have been internally displaced. The United States urged a positive vote, Mr. Kerry said ahead of the Syrian National Coalition's meeting. He described the meeting that takes place this coming Tuesday of next week. He described that peace conference in Switzerland as the beginning of a process that is the, quote, best opportunity for the opposition to achieve the goals of the Syrian people and the revolution. Oh, all right, friends, I'm sorry. I thought we had video for this, but we only had a still slide for this story. Now, I do have video for our next story. Only, when it rains, it pours. Friends, I just had a problem that may have just crashed our video player. Yes, it did. However, if you will stand by with me while I ad-lib, I'm going to put our slide up on the screen and just mention some things about it while I bring our video player back up from the playing computer. This slide you see on your screen right now is the left side of a larger slide that has all 7 of the seals of Revelation on it. The ones that are on the left side are from Revelation 6. We'll go close up on that. And includes only the first 6 of the 7 seals in Revelation. These first 6 seals being described in chapter 6 of Revelation. And the first 4 of them being related to 4 horses, 4 different colored horses. And the last 2, and the first 4 have been operating since shortly after Jesus Christ. The other 2 are yet coming. The fifth seal, we are watching signs and events for the coming of the Great Tribulation that's pictured by the fifth seal. And much of the news we watch for you relates to interest in that event happening. Now, it also relates to these four seals that continue to operate and which Jesus Christ described in plain language in Matthew 24. And Jesus Christ opened up that secret fact that he kept hidden from mankind until the days of his latter days end-time servant and apostle Herbert W. Armstrong. And ever since then, ever since God revealed that through his servant Mr. Armstrong, many have been able to see and understand, the first seal relates, even though some still argue about this one. Of course, the Revelation 12:9 tells us that that old serpent, the dragon, Satan the devil, has deceived the whole world. And Jesus Christ tells us in Matthew 24, beware of religious deception. Many will come in my name saying that I'm Christ and will deceive many. But don't let them deceive you, he says. And that relates to the first seal, the white horse, as Revelation 6 depicts it. Many confuse that white horse thinking that's Christ, but they confuse the leader of the great religion of this world as if he were as if he were light and part of the truth, when in fact he's part of the great, great, great deception. And now, friends, I'm trying to bring up the video player and what we need from it as I ad-lib that to you, but and some of the things are happening slowly, like we're continuing to have problems, but let's see if it straightens out. Hopefully it will in a moment. The second seal, pictured by a red horse in Revelation, is described by Jesus Christ in plain language in Matthew 24 as war and rumors of war and world war, nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And then your third seal and your fourth seal, they relate very much together. As Mr. Armstrong well put it for us, he said they often, war will bring famine, and along with famine comes disease epidemics. So you've got famine as your third seal, the black horse, and you've got the pale horse, picturing actually three things. Mr. Armstrong advised that, look, I'm just giving you the basics. My ministry will give you the details. And one of the details related to that fourth seal is that Jesus Christ described it in three different terms that the gospel writers wrote up in three different Aramaic or Greek terms: loimos for the disease epidemics, pestilences, the plagues of Egypt; seismos for commotions in the air, commotion on the ground, commotions in the air such as gale force winds of all kinds, including a couple of stories related to today, the fires in California and also a great fire in the UK. And flooding and commotions on the ground, such as it gives earthquakes, but that also includes tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, wildfires start on the ground, flooding. And the third thing he described was tarake or tarake, which in the Greek language means trouble. Not the major trouble, not the mega trouble of the great tribulation of Seal 5, but trouble that leads to that great tribulation. And now, friends, I've been able to get our video player back up. Let's hope it continues to work, because there are a couple of stories yet that I want to cover with you. And we just have a few minutes long enough to do this. All right, now, I let my teleprompter get behind on me. Let it catch up. This next story, by the way, is going to be related to that first seal, that white horse, related to religious deception. And it relates to the church that's 1/6 of the world's population is a member of that church. And that's and I don't mind telling you, and I don't think this is I'm friends, if you, some say, well, Stephen, that is hate speech. No, that's just the truth. And if you hate the truth, then it's hate speech. But I'm speaking to you from God's Word, and I'm not going to hedge it, you know. Friends, I had to stand up against the Coast Guard in order to keep the Sabbath. They threatened me with a Marine brig and said, if you're not on duty tonight, Friday night, in the brig you go. I said, sir, I don't want to go to that Marine brig, but if that's the option, you don't need to wait till the night. Here, put the cuffs on me now, because I won't be there, and when there's nobody on watch tonight, let it be on your head, not mine, because I'm telling you now, I will not be on duty on tonight on the Sabbath. I didn't use the word Sabbath for him because, you know, but when he said he said, Gilbert, I'm a good Catholic and I'll work Sunday. Sir, I'll work Sunday too, but I won't work on God's Sabbath. Now, I did mention Sabbath then to him and made him as mad as a wet hornet. He stormed upstairs to see the commanding officer. When he came back down, he was even more angry but restrained because, and as he had to put it, he didn't want to tell me this, but he told me the whole thing. He says, Gilbreth, the commanding officer ordered me to tell you. In other words, I wouldn't be telling you this on my own for anything, but the commanding officer ordered me to tell you that he ordered me that I cannot schedule you for work on Friday night from the Sabbath Friday, from sunset Friday night to sunset Saturday night. And he said he also ordered me to tell you that he looked into your personnel record, saw your leave to attend a religious festival that starts tonight was turned down, and he ordered me to tell you that he personally reversed that denial of your, that the personnel department denied you on being able to leave. They had no good reason to deny you except they knew you were applying for a CO and wanted to persecute you. He personally turned around your denied leave request, and you are free as of this moment to take off from this base and go attend your religious festival and, you know, be back in the 2 weeks leave you requested. Be back in 2 weeks and get your CO papers finished. We want you out of here. Well, good. That's exactly what I want, too. So, you know, you stand up for God's way, and he stands up for you. So, friends, I'm speaking out. You know, this relates to the first seal, the organization that's full of religious deception. Now, they do a few things right, but not, you know, by right, I mean good toward men, and, you know, some people may be very sincere, and I'm not against any of the people that God is going to be calling in the fall harvest at all. But in this next story, the Vatican has been confronted publicly for the first time over the sexual abuse of children by clergy at a UN hearing in Geneva. Officials faced a barrage of hard questions covering why they would not release data and what they were doing to prevent future abuse. They insisted the church had learned from the crisis and had taken action to prevent future abuse. Victims' advocates complained there was still too little transparency. Last month, the Vatican refused a request from the UN's Committee on the Rights of the Child, CRC, the Rights of the Child, or the Committee on the Rights of the Child, CRC, for data on abuse on the grounds that it only released such information if requested to do so by another country as part of legal proceedings. Friends, I think we have some video on this. Let's see if this will play.
There is no excuse for any form of violence or exploitation of children. Such crimes can never be justified, whether committed in the home, in schools, in community and sports programs, in religious organizations and structures. This is the long-standing policy of the Holy See. For example, Pope John Paul II stated that abuse of young people is, and I quote, by every standard wrong and rightly considered a crime by society. It is also an appalling sin in the eyes of God. For this reason, the Holy See and local church structures in all parts of the world are committed to holding inviolable the dignity and entire person of every child, body, mind, and spirit.
And friends, the Vatican came to Geneva expecting a rough ride, and it got it. It got one. The BBC's Imogen Foulkes has this report.
Powerful, often secretive, and traditionally almost untouchable, the Vatican has literally been a law unto itself for centuries. Misdemeanors were dealt with privately within the church, meaning critics claim that priests who abused children were never brought to justice. And despite many documented cases of the abuse of children by Catholic clergy, the Vatican itself admits it knows of at least 4,000 cases. Rome has never, until today, had to answer publicly for its actions. Survivors of abuse have travelled to Geneva to watch and listen.
We are hoping that finally the truth will be exposed, and more importantly, the church officials will change what they are doing, and that Pope Francis and that the church officials will take action that will actually protect children today and in the future.
The UN committee is expected to ask some tough questions. Why won't the church refer suspected abusers automatically to the police? Why won't it share the results of its own internal inquiry into sexual abuse with the UN? The hearings are public. They will also be webcast. And at their conclusion, the UN is expected to issue the Vatican with some recommendations for change, based on one simple principle: the welfare of children comes first, not the welfare of the church. Imogen Foulkes, BBC News, Geneva.
Okay, friends, now our next story, we go to one that relates to the United States. Former U.S. Defense Secretary Robert Gates has told BBC's Hard Talk it would be a serious mistake to impose additional sanctions on Iran while negotiations over the country's nuclear program were ongoing. He was responding to a question over whether it would be in the U.S. interest to impose new, tougher sanctions immediately as called for by some members of the U.S. Congress. But Mr. Gates, you'll hear him, we have an excerpt from this Hard Talk interview. You'll hear him say that the new sanctions, if the negotiations failed, could strengthen the president's hand.
Right now, the United States is at the forefront of efforts to negotiate a deal with Iran which would curb its nuclear program in return for a relaxation of sanctions. There are powerful voices in the United States Senate who, despite that negotiating process at a very sensitive stage, despite all of that, they want to impose new punitive sanctions on Iran right now. If they win that argument, if they do it, is that in the United States interest?
I think to impose additional sanctions right now would be a serious mistake. I believe that to enact additional sanctions that would become effective at the end of the 6 months, if the negotiations fail, actually would strengthen the president's hand in the negotiations. I think the message needs to be sent to Iran that the failure of the negotiations does not just produce the status quo ante, but in fact will lead to conditions in Iran becoming more difficult. But I would trigger it with the failure of the negotiations.
Right. But let me ask you this. How close during your time at the Pentagon did the United States come to making a decision to strike Iran?
I don't think under either President Bush or President Obama we were close to that decision.
Although
during
Dick
that
Cheney,
period.
you have said quite plainly, Dick Cheney believed the United States would need to make a military intervention, and if not, would certainly need to support Israel in a military intervention.
And as I indicate in the book, that by the time I became secretary, I think that the Vice President Cheney was an outlier in the Bush team.
So you do not foresee U.S. military action against Iran, even if the current negotiation fails?
I wouldn't go that far. I don't see any military action while these negotiations are going on. But if the negotiations were to fail, then I think, as the President says, all options have to remain on the table.
And friends, we have video with Mr. Gates, actually audio, so I'll just have a slide up with the audio where Mr. Gates is he was referred to in this hard talk, and U.S. military cuts mean no U.S. partnership, Gates warns. Well, let's play this.
What we have always been able to count on this side of the Atlantic were British forces that had full spectrum capabilities, very much along the lines of our own forces, that they could perform a variety of different missions. With the fairly substantial reductions in defense spending in Great Britain, what we're finding is that they won't have full spectrum capabilities and the ability to be a full partner as they have been in the past.
Friends, in yesterday's news, we had a report featuring I think some of our video went haywire on us tonight. I was about to go into a report with the Chancellor of England. Let's when we're live, things are going to happen. I'm going to ask you to go along with me as I see what's in this next video. This doesn't happen very often, thankfully, but inspect with me as we see what's in this next video here.
Give me your general reaction to Mr. Gates' remarks.
Well, one has to say Robert Gates is a hugely respected former Defence Secretary in the United States, and what he says does have a lot of truth, ring of truth about it. And it's a concern that many of us have been sharing for some time. I think the thing that's most important is that he is a senior representative of the United States government. It's always been our British government policy to be a close ally of the United States. And what he's actually saying is the amber lights are flashing. They're not sure that they can trust us, not necessarily to give them the political support that we have in the past, but do we have the capability, the training and experience, the hardware behind us to actually be able to put substance behind the policy and the expressions of support? And that is a concern, and I think it's one that we have to take on the chin and look at very, very carefully.
But isn't he somewhat living in the past, in that it is unlikely, if you don't know higher than that, it is unlikely that ever again will British and American forces, will boots be on the sand in the Middle East. America is just, its mind is just out of there now. And it's redeploying already, it's moving a bigger chunk of its navy over to East Asia. And that's where the danger signals are for the 21st century. And there, we bring nothing to the table in East Asia.
Well, if you take that narrative as being how the world will unfold over the next 5, 10, 15, 25 years, then I think actually we can probably afford to take the risk of having much reduced armed forces. But
except that we may find, if our oil supply lines are cut, that we, the Europeans, may have to do something on our own without the Americans.
You've just kind of made the point I was going to make.
Oh, sorry.
You're very bright, Andrew, but you do not know with great clarity how the world is going to unfold over the next 5, 10, 25 years. And strategic shocks happen, and we've been terribly bad at spotting them in the past. And if our military capability is significantly eroded, we will struggle to be a significant player.
But I'm not telling you how the world, I wouldn't deign to do that. What I'm telling you is that is White House policy, that is the pivot to the Pacific that has been happening under President Obama, who has no desire ever again to get entangled in the Middle East.
No, I fully accept that. That is their policy. But even the United States, within its wisdom, cannot determine how the world is going to unfold.
You may be wrong.
I think the wider point here is really, has the UK thought sufficiently on what its strategic interests are in the future? What is the quality of the relationship we want to have with the United States in the future, and dare I say it, with Europe? I think these are big issues, and these are issues that have got to be confronted in the next defence review after the next election. What is Britain's ambition in the world?
Friends, I think you can see from the way that talk is going and the earlier interview with Mr. Gates that we have some precarious times ahead of us. I hope you'll stay tuned every night, Sunday through Thursday, as we keep our eye closely on the events of the day's current news that are related to the Bible and prophecy right here on Nightcast. Thank you for joining me tonight. That's all the time we have for this evening, this Thursday night. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back for our next edition on Sunday evening. For those of you that join us on the weekend, we'll be on a different channel, on the Sabbath Service channel. There's a button up at the top of most of the web pages we appear on for that on the weekends, and the times are on our homepage on cogtv.org. Again, thank you for joining me tonight, dear friends. Until next time, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd, saying, so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.